So the fund has to design certain rules. There's certain directives, certain guidelines that an application has to meet. And if the application doesn't meet these basic rules, then they cannot apply. It's being sent back to the filmmaker. So the commission or the jury or the commissioners in whatever fund, they never get projects on their plate that don't meet the basic rules of the fund. For instance, how long a director lives in Holland, or if a co-production is spending 50% of its money in the country, or if the language, for instance in the Dutch case, if the language is for regular productions is, I think it needs to be 60% of the dialogues need to be in Dutch. There's all kinds of like technical rules that an application has to fulfill before you can actually apply. So the Flemish Audiovisual Fund is the Belgium, Dutch-speaking Belgium fund, because they have two funds, because Belgium is French languaged and Dutch languaged. So I was an advisor in the jury, because they have a jury system still, but they have a different way how the jury is actually working. They have like a permanent jury, and this jury is made up from people either who are working outside of the country. So for instance, a sales agent who is based in Germany but who is actually Belgium. People from the television companies, and foreign directors like me. That's the reason why I was, for instance, asked to be on the documentary commission for, I was there for 5 or 6 years. Again, so there are people who are not actually in the working industry, so there are people who are out, who are related to the industry, but who are not actually active in the industry. And this commission is always hosted and controlled, and like there's the chairman, and the chairman is somebody from the fund. So they are there to guard the directives and the guidelines from the Belgium Film Fund. Again, the Belgium Film Fund has a strong director who has his vision on, in this case it's a man, who has his vision on what the fund should do for Belgian film industry, and what his vision is on how it should be promoted and stimulated. So there are juries for documentary, for fiction, for I don't know exactly that. I think experimental film, animation, etc. I was on the documentary jury for a long time, and they have a very nice system. I think I like the Belgium system the best. So because they have a relatively independent jury who is discussing the projects. And what is very nice about their project is that every jury member gets a few projects that are applying under their responsibility. So it means that if you apply to the VAF, the Belgium Film Fund, with a documentary proposal for script or for development or for production, automatically you have the possibility to speak with one of the jury members. As a jury member, I get, for instance, 5 projects under my wing. So I have meetings before the actual jury meeting. So the big meeting, there will be a meeting where the producer and the director can talk with me. Can tell me things that maybe are not clear in the dossier, or new developments, or whatever, they can ask me questions about what will happen in the jury meeting, and I'm there as their ambassador, you could say. So I listen to them, and in the jury meeting I am like their ambassador. So if people don't understand the script or whatever, I have also read the script and I have asked them, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? Why do you do it like this? Etc., etc. So, as a commission member, a jury member in, as a jury member in the Belgium Film Fund, you are also like an ambassador for the filmmaker. You have a meeting. You can have a meeting if the filmmakers, the producers and directors, if they want, they can have a meeting with you before the actual jury meeting and explain more about the project. I can ask questions, for instance, of what I find unclear about their project, so that once we're in the meeting, when other jury members have a problem or they don't understand or whatever, we can discuss it, and I can sort of tell them what my conversation was with the filmmaker. And once the jury meeting has decided what how, if they're going to get the money or not, the filmmakers can call me by phone. They can call me and ask me why it was turned down. They never call me, of course. When they got the money, they never call me. But when they don't get the money, they call me and they ask me, do you think, for instance, it's worthwhile to reapply, or what was the atmosphere or whatever? So, of course, I can only give them my point of view, because the other thing is that, like I explained before, there is at every jury meeting, there is the chairman is somebody from the fund. And this fund person is also making a report. And the letter that is being sent, the advice that is being sent to the filmmakers, whether they get the money or not, is motivated by their report. And the report, of course, is taking the different opinions of the jury members, but they are actually working it out in such a way that it's not harmful for the filmmakers, that it's very clear, etc., etc. So they're like a moderator, like a chairman, and they're also the communication point between the jury and the producer afterwards. So you have two communications with one jury member that is your ambassador, and with the official written report that comes back from the fund. So the way that the jury members are selected in the Belgian Film Fund is on recommendations, for instance, of the Dutch Film Fund. That's how I got in the jury. So the Belgian Film Fund asked our Dutch Film Fund who they would recommend as a jury member, and they sort of suggested me. Now I'm already over my years, 4 years. You can sit there and then they regard you as somebody who should step aside and they want to have new people. And now, for instance, there's one of our best film critics, Dutch film critics, is sitting in the Film Fund. And there's some other, like a Dutch producer who's sitting there in the Belgian Film Fund. So, and other people, they're looking out for, they're always looking out for people who are who know about script reading, who are professional in the industry but not directly involved in the production of films. And it's basically up to who the director of the Film Fund thinks is suitable for this. But just briefly about the advantages of the Belgium system, what I find very useful is that there's a personal contact between you and the fund. Just like in Holland, where you have one commissioner. In this case, you have the filmmaker and a commission member, and of course, if you're sitting there for 4 years, you get to know the producers. So I know a lot of producers in Belgium now, which for me personally is very nice, but they also know me. So it's the personal contact also makes that you have from the fund, you have like a personal relationship, start to develop a personal professional relationship with many people in the industry, and you see people again and again. So this is very nice. The other thing is that in comparison with the Dutch system, what is very good about this is that there is a discussion. There's a discussion. It's not only one person who is deciding and then puts it in front of the people who are sitting in the fund, but it's an outside jury who is discussing the projects, which I think in a way, even though there's, in small countries, again, there's very little people, and personal taste becomes very present, still within, how they try to do it in the Belgian Fund, I think for me, it's the best way to do it. As an advisor, how do you decide whether a project is a good project or not? Should it be funded or not? And not to only go for your own taste in these things. Sometimes you have, as an advisor, you have to read scripts or look at projects that are not specifically the kind of films that you want to watch. So how do you judge then the projects that are not really within your taste? The directives, so the guidelines for this should actually come from the Film Fund. So the Film Fund is setting the rules that are coming from their policy. So for instance, we want to stimulate young filmmakers to develop their projects, or we want to really reach out to build an international name for our local cinema. We want to stimulate co-productions or whatever, so there's all kinds of different things that are part of the vision of a film fund. So from this vision are coming the rules, let's say the guidelines for the advisors how to read a project. And very important is then, who are the people working on the project, but also will the project appeal to an audience, which is not necessarily my personal audience, but it could be, children's films or whatever. So there's all these kind of rules which you have to think about as a fund, so you can help your advisors to step over their own taste and look at the projects from a different perspective than their own personal perspective. So this is a very important thing. I've also been advisor to the Media Fund, which is a big television fund in Holland with a lot of money to support cultural programs on Dutch TV, which is a very good fund in itself. But they had a system that didn't work at all. They had a system whereby they wanted the jury members to be anonymous, so you wouldn't know who is in the jury, who is deciding on your project. And they wanted to have as large as possible amount of jury members. So they had a kind of everybody who would remotely be busy with film, or with TV would be in the pool, and they would just draw people out of this pool to sit in the jury. And for me, this didn't work because I've been on those juries several times, and the problem is that you will get people who hate each other, and then they don't have to say their name even on top of that. You get people who cannot judge certain projects because they have no idea about certain projects. They don't fit to the projects. They're not used to read scripts, because there's very little people in Holland, in a small country, who are used to read scripts. I am, because I'm also script editor. I've done courses to do this. I'm working with filmmakers and script writers to improve their script. So I'm a filmmaker, but I'm also a professional script editor and coach. So it means that for me it's easier to be independent and to have not my personal taste interfere. So, but a lot of people in that large group in our small country, of course, didn't have this expertise. And when you start to pick out people there on random, it's maybe it's very good as a kind of, let the people decide. But it's in the end, it was actually really difficult. And for instance, they have a system whereby you can appeal. So when you don't agree with the reasons why they turn it down, because they also have to do a report. The report again is done by the fund and not by the jury members, but it's written down by the fund. You get this advice, you don't agree with it, which of course happens with this fund very often. Then you can appeal to the board to turn things around, and very often in the board there are people who are professional, and they can see that, you know, the commission just made a mistake. You know, and I also remember, for instance, I have to admit that when I would be sitting with a commission of a jury of people who had no clue about a project, and I would explain to them, like, look guys, this project should be supported because this and that and that and that, and you have to read it like this and that and that and that. And I noticed that I could influence the commission or the jury. I could influence them very easily, because a lot of them didn't have the expertise to read, and then it's very easy to influence people. So that's another very bad thing. You know, it's that way I got support for a couple of projects, but it's not good.